Hi, good morning, boys and girls, and welcome to Children's Worship. Although you probably can notice that it's not morning where I am. I'm out in my backyard right now, and it's gotten dark. The sun has set, and at the very beginning of this video, you may have noticed something bright up in the sky. That was the moon, and it's just a tiny sliver right now, but it's right above my head. And so today, you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with our Bible lesson? So you may remember last week we talked about Jesus's birth. So Jesus was born in a stable surrounded by animals, and his parents laid him in a manger. They were in a city called Bethlehem. Well, tonight we're going to talk about something special that happened that night that has to do with the night sky. So we looked at the moon at the beginning of this video, but on that special night, there was something that people call the Bethlehem star. And that star was a guiding light for three very special people who visited Jesus. Do you know who they were? They were the wise men, or sometimes people call them the Magi. So these special people traveled a long way, and they used that night star to guide them to where Jesus was. Far away in the east, three clever men saw the very same star, the star that God had put in the sky when Jesus was born. They knew it was a sign. A baby king had been born. They had been waiting for this star. They knew it would come. "He's here!" they shouted. "He's here!" And I'm sure if you'd been there, you would have heard them laughing and dancing and singing until the sun came up. At dawn, they packed up their camels and wrapped gifts for the baby. They brought their most precious treasures of all, frankincense, gold, and myrrh. Special, sparkly, lovely smelling, gleaming things, just right for a king. The three wise men, actually, if you met them, you'd have thought they were kings because they were so rich and clever and important looking. Well, they set off. They rode their camels across endless deserts, up steep, steep mountains, down into deep, deep valleys, through raging rivers, over grassy plains, night and day and night, for hours that turned into days, that turned into weeks, that turned into months and months, until at last they reached Jerusalem. Jerusalem was by far the most important city for miles around, and as anyone can tell you, that's where a palace would be, and kings are born in palaces. So that's where they went. But they were in for a surprise. They went to see King Herod. Surely he'd know where this baby was. But he didn't. In fact, he didn't like the sound of a new king. It made him cross. He didn't want anyone to be king except him. But Herod's advisors told the three wise men what was written in their books, what God had said about the baby king. "Go to Bethlehem. That's where you'll find him." Suddenly, the star they had seen in the east started moving again, showing them the way. So the three wise men followed the star out of the big city, along the road, into the little town of Bethlehem. They followed the star through the streets of Bethlehem, out of the nice part of town, through the not so nice part of town, into the really not nice at all part of town, down a little dirt track until it stopped right over a little house. But wait, it wasn't a palace, and there weren't any guards, or servants, or flags, or red carpets, or trumpets, or anything. Did they get it wrong, or was this what God meant? Sure enough, in that little house, there, sitting on his mother's knee, they found him, the baby king. The three men knelt before the little king. They took off their rich royal turbans and gleaming golden crowns. They bowed their noble heads to the ground and gave him their sparkling treasures. The journey that had begun so many centuries before had led three wise men here, to a little town, to a little house, to a little child, to the king God had promised David all those years before. But this child was a new kind of king. Though he was the Prince of Heaven, he had become poor. Though he was the mighty God, He had become a helpless baby. This king hadn't come to be the boss. He had come to be a servant. So that story that I just read came out of a children's Bible storybook, but it's a retelling of the story you can find in the book of Matthew, chapter 2. And this is a really special story because there was an astronomical event, an unusual event. You may remember back in December, we had a similar unusual event where Jupiter and Saturn, two planets in our solar system, came very close together and made a really bright light in the sky. I don't know about you, but we definitely got out our binoculars and took a look at that. And if you think about how special and how unusual that was, the wise men knew when they saw that star that something amazing was going to happen, and they followed it to Jesus. They didn't know where Jesus was. They just followed the star and it led them directly to him. And he wasn't in the stable, he was in a house. Something else that was special about this story is there were some dreams that protected Jesus and protected the wise men. First, the wise men were warned not to return to Jerusalem and to Herod because Herod was a very bad man. Also, Joseph, Jesus' father, was told to flee to Egypt, fulfilling the prophecy, "Out of Egypt I called my son." So now that we've heard the story, let's review a couple of the important things we learned. First of all, what did the Magi see that caused them to look for Jesus? They saw a star, a beautiful star that they followed to him. How did King Herod know that the wise men would find Jesus in Bethlehem? Well, Herod didn't know anything about it, but the chief priests that worked with Herod, the teachers of the law, they knew the prophecy, and they said that the ruler of Israel would be born in the town of Bethlehem. What gifts did the Magi bring to Jesus? They weren't very practical gifts for a baby, I'll tell you that. They brought frankincense, myrrh, and gold. And why do you think they brought those kinds of gifts? They brought them because Jesus was a king, and those are the kinds of things that you would give to a king. So besides giving gifts, what other thing did the Magi do when they finally saw Jesus? They bowed down, they took off their crowns and their turbans, and they worshiped him. And we should do the same thing. It shouldn't take an astronomical event like a beautiful bright star in the sky for us to remember to follow Jesus. So I thank you for joining me today, boys and girls. Next week, we're going to take a look at Jesus when he was just a little bit older, a child about your age, and we'll see what kinds of things he was doing. Have a great week.